Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scottish Police Authority's February meeting. I'm delighted to welcome those who are joining us on live stream and also those observers we have who are sitting with us here in person. So we have apologies from Katrina Stewart. Anyone else, Karen? Do we have apologies from? Thank you very much indeed. So it's a requirement of our code that members declare any financial or other interests and connections in relation for today's business meeting. Members, are there any connections or declarations that we're required to declare? No. And similarly, are there any other business that members wish to raise with me before we start? No. So again, in accordance with section 20 of our standing orders, can I ask members to confirm that they're content to take the following items in private today? Item 19 is the private minute of the meeting we held in November, which records discussions on pay and reward and the update relating to the Sheikh Obai inquiry. Item 10 is to discuss approval of the SP review of strategic risk, and item 11 is to discuss pay and reward. Are members content to take these matters in private? Yes, we are. Thank you. So the minute from our previous meeting from the 28th of November, does anyone have any matters of accuracy they wish to raise? Are people content to approve the draft minute of the last public authority meeting? So we have the rolling action log with just one open action, and at the moment is proposed as ongoing. Given that the work is now in place and there will be a scheduled report to the Policing and Performance Committee in June, I'm going to propose that we close this action on that basis. Are people content that we close that action? Yes, thank you, and then approve the action log with one closure. And then finally, in terms of the routine business, we have to note what decisions we've taken by correspondence since the last meeting, and there have been two decisions taken via correspondence. The first was in December, where members approved an offer to be made to the trade unions in respect of the staff pay claim, and the second was in January, where members approved the appointment of Tom Halpin as Chair of the People Committee to allow me to take on the role of interim Chair. So I'm now going to move us on and take the agenda items. So in terms of my interim chair's report, there was one issue not recorded in my report due to submitting the report prior to the 14th of February, when a 4.75% pay deal for officers was confirmed following a formal arbitration process. So in these challenging financial climates, I think the outcome ensures important recognition of the valuable contribution our police officers make, and I want to thank the officers and the Staff Association representatives for their continued commitment and patience during the negotiations and the arbitration process, which was of course the first time that arbitration had to take place. And then I would like to highlight also the formal confirmation from the Scottish Government regarding the reappointment of myself, Paul Eadie, Alistair Hay and Katerina Casper as authority members, and that was communicated on Tuesday the 18th of February. We do have some decisions that I have outlined in my report, but other than, and I'll come to them shortly, is there anything else anyone wants to raise on my report? Angela?
Thank you, Chair. I note in your report the meeting that was held with COSLA. It was your predecessor, and I acknowledge that. I wondered if the colleagues might expand on the discussions on the challenges facing the public sector and the implications for Police Scotland in particular with the budget issues that they're facing, and whether or not we've taken part in the discussions earlier this week on public service reform and what might have come from that.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Chief Executive.
Thank you. Yes, the ongoing dialogue with COSLA in terms of the challenges, and that also happens with the Police Scotland as well. It's a tripartite discussions. In terms of the event that was held on Monday, that I think you're referring to, the reform, public sector reform. So I attended it. It was for either chairs or chief executives of all the public sector bodies in Scotland. It was very well attended. It was hosted by Ivan McKee, the Minister for Public Finance. I would say everyone there was very engaged and committed to moving forward. And from my perspective, when I was there, my view was that a lot of what they were talking about, Police Scotland have done in their first phase of reform, you know, in terms of the SPA and our role in that. And on the papers today, for example, you've got in the interim chair's report to do with the mental health and the work that's been taken forward there around mental health distress. The SPA were integral to that through the work of Amanda Coulthard. And also when I was at the event, I was listening to what they were saying about the single estate in Scotland, and I was thinking, well, that's what James Gray has done in Police Scotland, and absolutely leading edge on that. So I was confident we are very much part of that discussion. We're very much willing to share our experiences. And as you know, through the Chief Constable's vision and 3-year plan, there's a commitment to a second phase of reform, and we aren't complacent. So very much I thought along the lines that the authority have set out their expectations on police and on forensics and on ourselves. And we will very much take part of it. I'd like to say, Chair, when the outcomes of that event are made public and the paperwork that was sent out in advance of it, I'll share it with board members, and we could pick up maybe at a board seminar to discuss your input into that.
Any other questions or comments? So may I take us through the decisions we need to make in terms of the approval? And this is due to a number of board members having completed their 8 years service, and we're awaiting further board members to come. So we are needing a bit of change of the committee memberships, but that would be, I suspect, subject to further review once we have new board members in place. So may I have our agreement to approve Chris Cregan as Chair of Legal Committee? Chris Cregan as a member of the Complaints and Conduct Committee, Pauline Howie as Chair of the Resources Committee, and this is all from the 1st of April. Pauline Howie as a member of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, Angela Leach as a member of the People Committee, and Mary Pitt-Keithley as a member of the Legal Committee. And all of the above is from the 1st of April. But with immediate effect, may I ask for members to approve the appointment of Angela Leach as the authority's whistleblowing champion? And the reason that that would be effective immediately would be so that there can be a handover, and if there were to be anything that were raised with the whistleblowing champion, that could then make sure there was continuity. So with immediate effect, Angela as the whistleblowing champion. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us on now to the committee chair's report, and as I chaired the last People Committee, I'll speak briefly. I'll obviously take the report as read. But I think the one thing I would like to highlight is the staff survey, and I'd like to commend Police Scotland, and it's been some time now since our November meeting, for their openness and transparency in terms of embracing the survey with a commitment to act so that they can respond to staff concerns, but also build on the positives that have been highlighted in the report. So other than that, I'm happy to take questions from members. No? So I'll hand over then in terms of Policing Together Oversight Group with Tom Halpin.
Chair, I take it the report has been read and go straight to the conclusions of that report and highlight the work around the independent reference group and other groups that Police Scotland have, and that is under review, and the committee has been fully engaged in that conversation. We look forward to the final outcome of that work. And the other significant piece of work is the review of the Policing Together strategy was the explicit consideration, not internally but externally, with engagement with the communities, and the amount of collaboration and working together in that area was commendable. So those were two significant areas of going forward. And the final part is the review of the human rights and equality impact assessment process will give us the assurance regarding the wider policies that there's no unintended discrimination in these reports, in historical language, for instance, and that work is ongoing, so that's to be commended also.
Okay, Tom, thank you very much indeed. Do any members have any questions or comments for Tom? No. So I'll move over to the Policing and Performance Committee with Alistair Hay.
Thank you, Chair. Likewise, I will take this report as having been read, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but before I get to that, there's just a couple of things that I would like to highlight from the report. Policing performance, the reporting of which is clearly the cornerstone of this particular committee, and we were really pleased to see in the Q2 policing performance report which was discussed at length, that this report has been restructured to align with the newly launched 2030 vision of the organisation. I think the clarity in terms of the direction they travel, but also the performance as we go on that journey, I think that alignment is significant, so we welcome that. In another area that has had significant scrutiny and conversation is the members received an update in respect of the ongoing wide-ranging review in relation to policy and practice to recording sex and gender within Police Scotland. The committee were given assurances on the wide scope of the review. They queried the timescales of the delivery, the extent of stakeholder engagement and the mechanisms for ensuring legal and policy compliance. We were also requested that the terms of reference would be shared with members, and I can report that these were shared with members in December. So with that, I'll stop speaking, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Katerina?
Alistair, thank you, Chair. Just on the topic of the review of the sex and gender, absolutely, I just wanted to say a few words around the scope of this. So, I think we're all quite cognizant that it started off with criticism around the recording of sex and gender on police systems. But, Police Scotland quite rightly, quite appropriately committed to a wide-ranging review of all the policies where clarity on sex and gender is required, and in fact the distinction between those two. And I'm sure colleagues around this table are aware of the Employment Tribunal where Sandy Peggy against NHS 5, part 1 of which concluded just last week. Now, without prejudging the outcome, naturally, of that tribunal, I think this case clearly demonstrates how important it is for public bodies to be fully cognizant of all applicable laws and ensure that internal policies are accurately reflecting those laws as well. I know that MSPs, political commentators, legal academics have alleged institutional capture of public bodies in this area of policy, and I would argue that out of all the public bodies, Police Scotland is the last body that can afford to be criticised of that. And I'm not saying that that is the case, but I think this review, therefore, to me, is certainly vital on providing that assurance and ward off any such criticisms. And just one final point now, having followed the coverage of the Employment Tribunal, I was particularly struck with the arguments made by one side around the implication of policies on human rights. And I know that human rights for Police Scotland are absolutely at the core of all of its operations. So I think the engagement with bodies such as the Scottish Human Rights Commission are absolutely essential in this. And again, I will be expecting to see the advice that's being provided from these institutions to be reflected in the review as well. Thank you.
Katerina, apologies. Do you have a question for Alistair?
No, that it was more a point.
Okay,
really, to make.
Thank you very much. And you're a member of the
I am a member of the
Policing
Policing
Committee,
Performance
so you'll
Committee.
be receiving the reports that
Thank
are
you.
coming in due course. Thank you very much indeed. Grant McCree, Resources Committee. There's Grant. Hi.
Thank you, Chair. I have two meetings to report on, one on the 18th of December and the other on the 13th of February. I'll take both meeting reports as read, but a couple of comments from me on two items that were discussed in the 13th of February meeting. We looked in detail at the latest financial position for the current year, and effort continues to be made to achieve a balanced revenue outturn against budget, which is very commendable given the amounts of money involved. And with just a few weeks to go, it's still quite tight. But our main concern was the continued risk that the capital budget would not be fully utilised in the current financial year. So we were glad to learn there's daily monitoring of capital right through to the 31st of March. Turning to 25-26, next year, we discussed the draft budget and the planning assumptions. There remains significant risk relating to the funding for the increased employers' national insurance contributions for next year, and clearly any shortfall in that will have an impact on the number of employees. And on capital, since this is an ongoing focus of ours, we welcome the assurance of the work of the Capital Planning Task Force to achieve a better spread of the spend available throughout the year. And finally, Chair, if I may, I'd like to make a correction to the update I gave to the board on the 22nd of August last year. When I referred to the item on the police housing policy, I stated that an island community impact assessment had been completed. I've since been informed that this assessment was in fact still in progress and hence not complete. So for clarity, I'd like to take this opportunity to correct the record and have this reflected in today's minutes. And can I just also confirm for clarity that my written update provided to the board meeting in August is factually accurate and requires no correction. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Grant, thank you very much indeed. And of course, we'll have a finance paper later on the agenda as well. Do any other members or any members have any questions for Grant? No, thank you very much, Grant. Then Paul Eadie, Forensic Services Committee.
Morning, Chair. Yes, we had a good meeting. I'll principally focus on the aspect relating to excuse me, drug driving. There's been a spike in demand for drug driving samples, partially explained by a winter campaign by Police Scotland on this issue over the Christmas period, which has led to a significant upturn in demand over the period of the last quarter reported, which exceeds the demand predicted in the MOU, and that's presented forensics with challenges. That surplus demand is being met by outsourcing. There's no danger then of time barring at the moment from any of this. But if that demand continues to be sustained in towards next year, then that might present problems with being able to source outsourced testing because of the volume of that. It does also present forensics with financial challenges, but I understand, and members probed on this, that will be met this financial year. But if the demand continues to be as high as it has been over the last quarter, then that might be problematic next year. So again, members sought assurances on all of these. So that's roughly what we discussed, and the rest is laid out in the report.
Thank you very much indeed, and obviously we'll have opportunity to ask Fiona Douglas more about what's happening within forensics with the presentation of her report. But do members have any questions for the Chair of the Committee? No, thank you very much indeed. So last but not least, we're going to go to ARAC and Mary Pickethley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. At the meeting on the 6th of February, we considered a number of items as listed here in the note. We had one internal audit report, which was on the important issue of the implementation of change projects and the associated issue of realisation of the change benefits predicted by these change projects, and we'll obviously ensure that we continue to track that. We also approved the annual internal audit plan from our internal auditors, BDO, and we noted the annual external audit plan from Grant Thornton. We had a very helpful update on progress in respect of preparation for the best value audit, which is shortly to commence. And finally, Chair, I would highlight that we noted the SPA's strategic risk review and agreed to recommend this to the authority for approval, and that will be on the agenda of this meeting later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Do any members have any questions for Mary? Thank you very much, everyone, for that. I'm now going to hand over to the Chief Constable for your report. Chief Constable.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The disruption and devastating effects of Storm Éowyn continue to be felt by communities across Scotland, including the tragic death of 19-year-old Callum Carmichael in Ayrshire. During the storm, police officers, staff and volunteers demonstrated professionalism and bravery to ensure that policing played its important part in the emergency response, along with Blue Light Partners, the Scottish Government, local authorities, health colleagues, SEPA and the third sector and others. I want to thank everyone who contributed to the efforts to preserve life and support those affected by the adverse weather. Chair, your report outlines discussions last month with Councillors Shona Morrison and Maureen Chambers, respectively the President and Community Wellbeing Spokesperson for the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities, COSLA. The meeting was an important opportunity to identify and pursue collaborative approaches to delivering for communities and improving people's lives. At the same time, the joint response during the storm underlined the strong and vital relationships are maintained at a strategic and operational level. I greatly value the scrutiny of and support for policing, which councils and councillors right across Scotland undertake every day. Returning to my report, I outlined the policing response to the horrific murder of 6-year-old Hope Gordon. Hope's murder is a shocking and deeply upsetting crime and utterly devastating for the families involved. My thoughts and the thoughts of everyone in Police Scotland are with Hope's loved ones. Such a tragedy also has a wide effect on the local community in West Calder, as well as across Scotland, including for officers and staff who responded, and I'm grateful for their support and cooperation as inquiries continue. I highlight the search for Henrietta and Eliza Hootsey, which sadly concluded with the discovery of their bodies, and I offer their family my condolences. Since my last report, there have been a number of important court outcomes following police investigations, some of which I outline in this update. These include the life sentence of 41-year-old Finlay MacDonald for the murder and attempted murders on Skye and in Wester Ross in August 22, and the conviction and sentencing of child exploitation and human trafficking offenders. I also highlight a County Lines Intensification Week, which ended in December, and during which officers made 81 arrests, safeguarded 66 vulnerable people, and seized illegal drugs, cash, and offensive weapons during a crackdown on drug dealers who exploit vulnerable young people. My report details the results of our campaign of enforcement, education, and communication around drug and drink driving, and officers engaged with more than 25,000 drivers and detected over 1,300 offences, as policing plays our crucial part in a partnership approach to reducing road fatalities and injuries. It's a very clear message: do not drive after drinking alcohol or taking drugs. And if you know anybody who's going to drive after taking alcohol or taking drugs or drinking alcohol, then please speak to them and contact the police if you think that's appropriate. Officers are on our road networks day in, day out, and we relentlessly target offenders. The breadth of police work described, from multi-agency emergency response, major investigations, and the actions to reduce harm and safeguarding the vulnerable, underlines the diverse and often challenging nature of policing, and the huge value our officers, staff and volunteers deliver right across Scotland every day. Next week, we'll pause to recognise and celebrate some of the incredible work of police officers, staff and volunteers, as well as the contribution of members of the public who step forward at times of crisis during our annual Bravery and Excellence Awards. Reading the nominations has been a great privilege and a powerful experience, and I'm continually blown away by the professionalism, skill, and dedication of our people. And I greatly look forward to congratulating and thanking nominees and winners in person. The great value of policing must be for all communities. People from all communities must know that when the police talk about keeping people safe, we mean them. All communities must feel able to speak to the police, to report a crime, share information, or consider policing as a career. This month, we'll be recognising and celebrating important milestones as part of our Policing Together programme, including Race Equality Week, an LGBT History Month, and during the Race Equality Week, the Force Executive participated in an anti-racist learning session to continue and lead Police Scotland's learning in this important area. Assistant Chief Constable Katrina Payton continues to develop the Policing Together programme through face-to-face learning and enhanced community engagement to put policing together into practice. And I want to thank DCC Alan Spears and ACC Katrina Payton and others right across the organisation for their work, and reaffirm my commitment to building an anti-racist, anti-discriminatory service which serves all of our communities inside policing and across society. As a service, we're engaged with UK policing to share our experience and understand how others are responding to this legal and ethical duty. Policing Together is an important programme in delivering our vision of safer communities, less crime, supported victims and a thriving workforce. And as we progress to 25-26, we will enter year 2 of our first 3-year business plan, which outlines the milestones we'll prioritise to help realise our ambitions. The vision and the business plan consciously prioritises the front line to support officers, staff and volunteers who deliver for our communities. And of course, a key element of that support is securing the resources required to provide effective policing, and we continue to monitor developments on the funding allocation available for 25-26. My report outlines that in January, our latest intake of 124 probationary constables maintained our officer establishment at just over 16,600. A further intake of officers is planned for March, which will continue to maintain our officer numbers. When the Scottish budget proposals were announced in December, I welcomed the continued support for the second phase of police reform, which enables policing to maintain a maximum officer establishment of 16,600, while we develop a sustainable and effective operating model and a modernised workforce. I was also clear that a key component of that position was the requirement that over £25 million of additional national insurance costs are fully funded. This continues to be the case. Workforce pay in Police Scotland accounts for 86% of our revenue spend, meaning there are very few levers to reduce costs other than through workforce numbers. The uncertainty also underlines the ongoing challenge of recruitment planning without multi-year funding allocations. Lastly, I provide updates on pay awards, including the agreement on a headline 4.75% police staff offer, and the decision toward police officers a 4.75% uplift to pay, and relevant allowancing following independent arbitration. As illustrated throughout my report, police officers, staff and volunteers deliver huge service and value for our communities, day in, day out, and I'm grateful for their skill, dedication and goodwill. And I'll stop there for questions, Chair. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and I, on behalf of the board, would like to echo your gratitude towards police staff and officers in the relentless day-to-day work that they do. We're all very grateful to them. So I have several members who've indicated that they want to ask a question, and I'm first going to go to Tom Halpin.
Thanks, Chief Constable, for your report. I want to refer to the arrest following the disorder on the 15th of December in the Scottish League Cup final. Scotland saw the running mobs in the city of Glasgow in the day, the most important day of the year for Christmas shopping, people, and that caused a lot of alarm. And so really, the questions around the learning from that in terms of the intelligence that was clearly, to gather in the uniform like that, it needs some organisation, etc., and deployments, etc. But also beyond that, we see the continuing issue of pyrotechnics within football stadia. So my question is, assurance around our learning, and any reference you'd like to make to that. And the other part is, are the football clubs doing enough in terms of that issue within stadia?
Very much for the question. Yeah, absolutely. I'll cover the disorder, but also talk more broadly about football and what's being done. So we know that policing football is increasingly challenging. There are increasing risk groups who are prevalent in a lot of the clubs, particularly across Scotland. The risk fans do put on highly organised pyrotechnic displays, as we've seen, and they also do prearranged violence. They have no regard for the local community, as we saw from the scenes, and they also have no regard for the reputation of football and the supporters who go to football, the vast majority who are not involved in trouble but simply enjoy going to football. So they do damage the reputation of Scottish football. The behaviour was completely unacceptable in December. There was a policing plan with both conventional and public order and specialist assets as well. The disorder took place 4 hours before the actual match was due to kick off. The people involved in it were wearing balaclavas to hide their identity, and they also wore similar clothing in order to try and frustrate the post-match investigation and make it more complex. We do monitor the intelligence. We work with the football clubs as well as our own intelligence sources to gather information, and we were able to really quickly send resources to be able to bring the disorder under control. There have been 5 arrests and the investigation is ongoing. I think if I talk more broadly around football, generally, we do work very closely with partners. There is something about making sure that there are deterrents and that there are internal sanctions for groups who get involved in this type of disorder. And there is a National Football Disorder Oversight Group which looks at partnership activity, not just policing tactics, but also our intelligence gathering to making sure that we are maximising all of that. There's also a multi-agency group that is particularly looking at football banning orders, and that's with the football authorities and the football clubs, COPFS and Scottish Government. That will look at the current legislation to see whether or not it is fit for purpose and do any changes needed. There's also a specific group that tackles the pyrotechnics issue, and that's developing that deterrent multi-agency approach, particularly the groups that get into the stadiums and how dangerous that can be within the stadiums, and ensuring that the football clubs, as has been asked, are actually doing their and taking their responsibilities seriously. We're particularly working with the judiciary, and we're very grateful for the number of sheriffs who have come out to football matches to actually see, feel and hear the disorder and just how the fans react to different situations. Because that immersive understanding when things come to courts and we're asking for the judiciary to help means that they're really able to bring their experience to bear. We've had 11 banning orders this year. We had a subsequent match on the 2nd of January and there was no repeat of the disorder because of the work that's ongoing. We're not complacent about it. We know that we need to keep going. Some of the learning is about spreading our deployments. If our deployments are too regular, then the fans know where we're going to be and at what time. So being able to change our tactics, change our deployment times, and also broaden our footprint is important. All of that, however, comes at a cost in terms of officer time for longer deployments or abstractions from community policing in other areas. So very grateful for the question. There's a lot of work ongoing, not just in policing, but multi-agency, and particularly with the clubs around the fans. And we will work towards to ensure that we don't see those scenes again. So thank you.
It's a very comprehensive answer and covers a lot of process and structures and all that. But on the day, the public experienced mass disorder in the main shopping street on Christmas shopping day, which is out the norm. So the question is, are we confident going forward that the intelligence particular would place it, and you've referred in January to it not being repeated, so that gives us some confidence, but reassurance, but going forward that any learning in terms of that gathering of pre-information has been maximised.
Yeah, it absolutely has. So that intelligence, making sure we're scooping it up from all different places. But I also come back to absolutely policing has a role, particularly in those areas which are away from the football ground and away from the clubs itself. However, that deterrent and getting on top of that attitude that allows people to think that behaviour is acceptable is actually part of it. But yes, absolutely, intelligence plays a key part in that, and we are working really hard on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any follow-ups to that one? No? Pauline Howie.
Informative report. I've got 2 questions. The first is in relation to the funding for 25-26. We heard at the Resources Committee last week that there are significant risks to being fully funded for the uplift in employers' national insurance contributions. So I wonder if you can explain what the implications would be in terms of the second year of the 3-year delivery plan and indeed beyond the second year. Thank you.
Thank you. So the matter of additional employee national insurance costs could have an impact on progressing the next phase of police reform. We remain in close constructive discussions with Scottish Government in relation to this issue as recently as this week. And the current indication is that we'll be supported with 50% of the costs. And as I said in my report, I previously welcomed the budget proposals which enabled us to progress the vision and the business plan, which were endorsed by the authority while also maintaining our workforce. But at the same time, I've been explicit that an additional employee national insurance costs facing us following the announcement by the Chancellor of Exchequer in October should be met in full. This organisation has brought about significant reform and has achieved so much, including large workforce reductions, and policing in Scotland has removed, as you know, over £200 million from the annual cost base compared with legacy arrangements, while continuing to protect and improve the service. And as I've said, our efficiency means that 86% of our revenue costs are spent on our workforce. Policing in Scotland's record of fiscal discipline and rigour, which you've been part of, has been an important component part of stability and credibility in recent years, and delivering a balanced budget is a priority to me. But the budget for 25-26 is very challenging and already includes a requirement to achieve £9 million of efficiencies. We also anticipate pay award costs and further costs associated with the public inquiry into the death of Sheikh Ubayou. So there are few levers for us to achieve further savings other than reducing the workforce. And as I outlined in my report, we are committed to another recruitment intake next month, but we are reviewing the recruitment profile for the coming year. My commitment to ongoing reform is evidenced through the 2030 vision and our 3-year business plan. And we are turning over every rock to achieve further efficiencies to build an effective and sustainable operating model which delivers for our communities. Constraints on funding will slow the progress of work that started and which is planned. And as we come towards the end of the first year of the 3-year plan, we are making improvements and efficiencies across policing, and these include improvements across criminal justice to deliver quicker and better outcomes for victims and witnesses, and targeting resources to focus on the most serious and harmful offending. We've made changes to provide those in mental health crisis or distress the help they need and deserve from the right agency, while allowing police officers to return to core duties more quickly. And we've taken a strategic approach in relation to our police buildings. Those should be kept, improved, sold and built, so that we can be clear about where there is opportunities to share with partners and to give our workforce the best accommodation. So 25-26 is the second year of the business plan, and we've been clear about what we want to achieve, while also underlining the need for financial support. So this next financial year, we want to further strengthen and develop our community policing model to provide identifiable officers to each local area. We want to establish a new cybercrime and fraud command to tackle the increased offending online and to better support victims. And we want to continue to invest in technology so that we're using our data we exploit our data for maximum effect, so that we can provide the best tools to our officers and staff and achieve efficiencies and develop the best ways of targeting high harm offenders. We want to continually look to modernise our workforce through the right investment and balance between warranted and non-warranted officers. And we're already planning with partners the delivery of safe and secure Commonwealth Games. So they're all the forward look for this year. And finally, I want to, in response to your question, underline my desire for us to explore more flexibility in policing finances. For example, certainty around multi-year settlements, exercising our borrowing powers, and a mechanism to carry forward reserves, all of which would greatly assist in long-term strategic planning, good sound decision-making, and making the best use of public money. As Chief Constable, I will ensure that Scotland continues to be a safe place to live and work, and that is my commitment and my priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-ups from that, either from yourself, Pauline, or other board members? No.
I've got a second question, and really welcome the development of the mental health distress framework for collaboration. Thanks to everybody that's been involved in that. What are the next steps for Police Scotland in terms of its implementation, and are there any particular priority areas?
Thank you for the question. I think first and foremost the demand on policing as a consequence of mental health and vulnerability still remains really high. So currently we still respond to 1,000 incidents a month of people going missing. 1 in 3 of those people missing are suffering from mental health issues. So the demand on the service remains high, and for those reasons we introduced, as you'll be aware in the past, a task force to drive progress on behalf of policing. I would also say, as an organisation, we are utterly reliant on the collaboration and commitment from other partners. You may have seen last week that the Scottish Government Framework for Collaboration was published. The principle for that is for services to work together, and that's all about having the right support from the right agency at the right time. And there's 4 commitments attached to that agreement around building capacity, communication, improving the transfer of care, and strengthening community-based provision, which for us is really important. So the work of the Mental Health Task Force is focused on the pathway. That is about our ability to divert incidents away from the police and into services that are better suited to meet the needs of individuals. So currently we've seen about 360 incidents that are being deferred to National Health Service. And these are 360 incidents that otherwise we would have previously attended. And I think importantly, the Mental Health Index, we have now been able to roll that across the entire force. So 24/7 officers have the ability to access a mental health clinician and provide some advice and direction at that point of contact. So there's a huge amount of work to be done. I think organisationally we're making good progress, and certainly from my perspective I can see a positive commitment from a range of partners in this space.
Any follow-up questions from board members? So I'm going to hand over to Chris Cregan now.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, I really welcome the coverage in your report on progress on the implementation of the Policing Together strategy, particularly the focus on putting the strategy into practice across communications, learning, communities, and so on. And of course, I've noted the ongoing detailed scrutiny of implementation by the Oversight Board. I welcome in your opening remarks your continued commitment to delivery in this area, and of course commend the leadership of DCC Spears and ACC Payton. I wondered if you could give me your sense of where we are in terms of progress on this journey, in particular in relation to the operationalisation of the strategy, which is so crucial. Thank you.
For the question, and I will pick that up. I think even if I focus some of my comments on the progress that we've made even since the last time that the board met, and I think one of the really important things that we've always recognised is that the policing together, embedding a culture, will take it a period of time, and I think what will help us and guide us is the introduction of a culture dashboard. So that dashboard will be available from April of this year. It will be a really important tool that we'll take into the Policing Together oversight group. One of the things that I'd asked the team to do was refresh the pillars in terms of where are we around Policing Together, and we've done that. I think we've enhanced that quite dramatically, particularly around community. So since we last met, we've recruited a number of community relationship specialists. And their role is to be very engaged with the harder to reach communities. Building on top of that, we are at the point of introducing an independent advisory council. Our experience around support from reference groups is invaluable. It's a timely point for us to look at the role of NISAG and perhaps look to see how we can enhance that. So we will, in the coming month ahead of the next financial year, introduce an independent advisory council which will guide us externally as we build those relationships with community groups. Some of you will be aware that we have rolled out a programme of further training around anti-racism, and many people around this table have probably now participated in some of that training. We've also embedded a fair play advisor, and that was a recommendation that came from Lady Angelini. One of the first tasks that advisor is looking at is around a promotion transfer and selection, and are we doing that in a fair and measured way? In addition, we've looked at our commitment to EQHRIA, and again brought some people with expertise into that space to support us going forward in that space. So I think there's a huge amount of activity. I think the culture dashboard in terms of how we present data will be really important to board members. But even since we met before Christmas, I'm really encouraged by a number of positive steps that the team have taken. And again, to give you a reassurance, even from the Chief's speaking notes this morning, policing together is a topical conversation around all our senior leadership boards.
Chair, can I'll just add to that. And your question, Chris, quite rightly prompts us to reflect in terms of progress. To give you some further reassurance, and Alan's provided a lot of detail there. My reflection is there is a real momentum in this space now. Well-resourced, strong leadership, and one of the reasons I'm confident in saying that is that when DCC Spears, ACC Paynton and colleagues have been in forums with colleagues from across the United Kingdom, people are looking to Police Scotland for advice, direction and support. So in terms of benchmarking our progress and our and the way in which we've developed in this area, I'm confident that we are leading the way. There is, of course, a long way to go, but we've certainly got ourselves in a position where we've taken that strategy and we're now putting it into practice across this organisation, and others are seeking guidance and direction from us. So I hope that provides some reassurance to you and to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. It absolutely does, and I really welcome the commitment you've given, the assurance of that momentum, which I can clearly see, and particularly welcome the emphasis on driving and measuring change in terms of organisational culture. I think that's so crucial, and also the point that DCC Spears made around that sort of combination of very robust external scrutiny with detailed scrutiny from the oversight board of the authority, which I think is really important in continuing to drive progress in this area. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Grant McCrae.
Chair. Thank you, Chief Constable, for your report. I've got one question in relation to Operation Moonbeam. Clearly, there was a lot of unacceptable levels of violence and disorder experienced on bonfire night, especially in some areas of the country, such as the two you've listed in Edinburgh. It's good to see the enforcement activity that's taken place subsequently, but I wonder if you could actually comment on any plans to limit future problems, such as perhaps restrictions on sale of fireworks.
Thank you very much for your question. And you're right, and our officers faced significant violence, as did our communities, and I'd like to commend the officers on the evenings that they faced that and how much they dealt with it. Just a quick update on the figures, you're absolutely right. There's a significant number of arrests. In fact, 61 were arrested across Scotland, 41 individuals were in the east of Scotland. So that proactivity from us to make sure that people are brought to justice is absolutely there. And of significance, the majority of the east of Scotland have actually been fitted with electronic tags and a 7 till 7 curfew. So the consequences of their actions will be felt, and that's really important. But coming back to your question, there was new legislation in 22 and 23 under the Fireworks and Pyrotechnic Article Scotland Act about proxy purchasing of fireworks, and actually then under 18s the possession of in a public place. And it's also got an aggravating factor when used or thrown at emergency workers. The fireworks control zones were brought in. We know there were some issues with the technicalities of putting those in by some of the local authorities, but that legislation is in. We also have dispersal zones and a number of other legislation aspects. We saw really good work in Dundee in terms of being able to be proactive with communities and local authorities to get into prevention. So I think coming back to your question, we would support our fire service colleagues in that fireworks should be at organised events, and then legislation or preventing the sale that enables people to get hold of fireworks that they can use in those situations for disorder would be something that we would support. So thank you.
Very helpful.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Alistair Hay now.
Is this to add anything to Grant's question or to...
You may, but I was thinking you had another question to ask.
Yeah, sorry, I know it was a question for the Chief Constable, but just in relation to Operation Moonbeam, I would also add my appreciation to the work that's done by Police Scotland and colleagues. I actually chaired a review into the use of fireworks in Scotland back in 2019, and legislation that the Deputy Chief Constable has just responded, has just informed us of. That's as a result of the recommendations made. But that review was as a result of a public consultation, and the vast majority of respondents to that consultation wanted to see restrictions on the use of fireworks. But what they also wanted is for people, families, to enjoy them safely, particularly at organised events. And one of the outcomes as well of that review was that there was no one single piece of regulation or legislation that was going to resolve this issue. So there was 11 recommendations made, and there's a big education and cultural change programme in place. But I think this year, the results, although there was some terrible behaviour out there, I think the results of this ongoing work are beginning to bear fruit, and I would commend the work done by Police Scotland. Okay, went on a little bit of a rant there, maybe. But what I would like to do, first of all, is, from the Chief Constable's report, is congratulate those that were recognised by the King in the New Year's honour. I know that everybody will say it's as a result of support that I've had from colleagues in wider Police Scotland, but please take a little bit of recognition for yourself. But on top of that, I would also like to recognise the work done by everybody within Police Scotland. And I think what your report does, Chief Constable, is highlights the complexity of the work undertaken by Police Scotland, the seriousness of the work undertaken by Police Scotland. But for me, in particular, what this does is it brings to life the values of Police Scotland. As you read through this, you can see that unless fairness, integrity, respect and human rights are being respected and valued, you could not deliver this. So, congratulations to everybody within Police Scotland. I have one question, and it's not actually contained within the report, but it's around the use of animals within Police Scotland. I know that we have a large number of dogs, and we have a large number of horses who add real value. And I just wondered if you would comment on the welfare that is important for these animals that assist Police Scotland.
Thank you very much for the question, and we welcome the opportunity to reiterate that police dogs and horses and animals are a hugely important part of policing and our policing family, and we know that they're also very much loved by the public. We're totally committed to animal welfare and looking after the animals that are in our service and the service of the public. And we particularly look after the handlers and the mounted staff and officers who dedicate their lives to making sure that the animals are looked after. I think a little bit of detail around some of the kind of standards that we work under. So in particular for dogs, we adhere to the new MPCC dog welfare standards, the Dog APP and National Canine Training Accreditation Scheme. So those are the banners that we have to make sure that we meet those standards, and we welcome the opportunity to meet those standards. Again, in terms of horses, Police Scotland Mounted Unit adheres to the Police Scotland Mounted Unit guidance, but also the MPCC guidance and the College of Policing Mounted APP. We have 24-hour access to veterinary surgeons and making sure that that is available to all of our staff. The quality of life and the welfare of our animals is absolutely paramount, and all of the decisions that we make within Police Scotland is based on the welfare and the quality of life of all of our animals. We also make sure that we take advice of vets in any circumstances where we're dealing with decisions around our animals. We also have a number of therapies. We do hydrotherapy, so we make sure that there's a number of treatments available for all of our animals, both dogs and horses. And I think the final thing I would say is we also make sure that we offer support to handlers and mounted branch colleagues, because the bond between the animals and either their riders or the grooms that look after the horses or the handlers or the trainers is absolutely huge. So anything that impacts on any of our animals, we know that that will also impact the handlers. We have significant support for the handlers as well. But I welcome the question to be able to show the amount of support, care and attention that we give to our animals, and they're an essential part of Police Scotland.
I really appreciate that reassurance, and I know it to be true. I attended a long service and good conduct presentation relatively recently, and what actually struck me was the number of people that were receiving their long service awards who'd been involved as grooms or as trainers within Police Scotland, 20-year service and more. So you can see that commitment that they actually give to the animals. And I spoke to a few of them afterwards, and animal welfare was at the forefront of the discussions they had with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Angela Leach now.
I wondered if there was an opportunity just to expand a bit on the work, the incident that you raised about the child sex abuse case in Glasgow, and the learning from that, just to give the authority some reassurance in terms of the learning from it, and also what intelligence we might be gleaning from other parts of Scotland to ensure that we pick these things up as early as possible.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. And you've highlighted a very high-profile case that many people will have looked with absolute disgust in terms of the details around the level of criminality and how that was sustained over a number of years. And I suppose the context and part of your question, we've seen other issues of safeguarding relating to children elsewhere in the United Kingdom that have become very, very high profile. And the key, we know, to good safeguarding, both in terms of from an investigative point of view and also from a safety point of view, the heart of that lies around good partnership working between ourselves, local authorities and other professionals in that area. So definitely a priority for us, and that's reflected in the vision in terms of support to victims and a focus on crime. Specifically to your point in terms of that learning, Jane will pick that up.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's a number of different areas and a number of different reviews. I think in relation to the learning and the Professor Alexis Jay reviews that were published, we did a benchmarking exercise through the National Child Protection Policy Unit in Police Scotland to compare the findings of the different reports and make sure that we were sharing learning, working with local authorities and looking at that. One of the advantages of being a single force with one vulnerability database which feeds local and national child protection procedures and single intelligence database, it means that our child protection policies already mirror many of the recommendations that were made by Professor Jay. But there are always opportunities to enhance learning and improve procedures and safeguarding. And so we're working through those different areas. I think just to highlight and kind of bring to life some of the work that's ongoing, there is a dedicated and specialist resources within each division in Police Scotland, and that is supported by national divisions of specialists, and they are there to focus on the protection of children and the investigation of child abuse. We also have the online child sexual abuse and exploitation unit, who are specifically set up to ensure that we're really looking at the investigation challenges that come with online sexual abuse in particular. Operation Moran is our national team that leads the response around county lines and the exploitation that can come through those processes, and how that links with some of the serious organised crime groups that operate in the UK and reach into Scotland as well. So I think to summarise, the progress by Police Scotland and the partner agencies to tackle child exploitation is really advanced, but there's always work that we can be done, and that continuous focus is required to protect vulnerable children and make sure that we are looking after people in our communities, and that benchmarking and ongoing review and recommendations will continue to be implemented.
For that, and thank you for the assurance, and particularly the fact that you have reviewed ongoing reports that perhaps are were specific to areas in England and Wales, but not in Scotland. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Okay, I'm now going to pass over to Mary Pickethley.
Yes, and thank you, Chief Constable, for your report. As always, it's a very good outline of everything, overview of everything that's happening, and the detailed answers to all the questions are much appreciated as well. Recently, there was media coverage of Police Scotland having raised a judicial review against Scottish ministers in relation to the Sheku Bayou inquiry. And this was characterised by some as an attempt to prevent or restrict justice for Mr Bayou's family. Now, I'm quite sure that the decision to raise this action wouldn't have been taken lightly and would only have been taken after detailed and careful consideration of all of the issues. But could you perhaps outline for us the rationale behind the decision to raise that action? Thank you.
Yes, I'll ask DCC Spears to provide the detail in relation to that.
Thanks very much, Mary, for the question, and I've been involved in and around the public inquiry for a significant period of time, and I think as a point of reflection, I still recognise, the Chief does, and I think as an executive, we still recognise the significant impact that Sheku's death has on his friends, his family and the communities, and that absolutely is not lost on us. We have always spoken about our firm commitment to engage fully and positively with the public inquiry, and that position remains unwavering, and in every piece of correspondence we reaffirm that position. You will be aware that back in September there was a request to extend the terms of reference made of the Deputy First Minister. Over the months that have followed, we have been asked on a number of occasions to submit submissions around the proposed extension of the terms of reference. As time has went on, it's been our position that we felt that we haven't always had access to all the available information that would allow us to make a really informed position on behalf of the Chief Constable. We asked for all the available information, and that regrettably was declined, and following some really significant legal discussions, we followed a legal process to get access to that information, which we then were able to get. We have then, I would suggest, submitted a full and final position in relation to the public inquiry, and we now await a decision from the Deputy First Minister. But our position is very much about committed entirely to the public inquiry, and that remains, and we'll continue to follow through on whatever decision is reached in relation to the future of the public inquiry.
Helpful in terms of explaining the rationale. Thank you.
Any other board members wish to raise any questions with the Chief Constable? No? Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to move on now to the Chief Executive's report. I'll hand over to Lynn Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just touch briefly, just to confirm that the recruitment for the Assistant Chief Constable has been initiated, and there will be interviews in March 25. In terms of board member recruitment, I know that board members were concerned we will lose 3 board members at the end of March, and they asked me to write to the government to see what the process was for recruiting further board members, and particularly the timeframes. They have come back to say that they are looking to launch a public appointments process in the coming months. In terms of the budget, the Chief Constable has very much referred to the 25-26 and the representations we have made to the government on funding the 25.3 million for the NI. And that's set out in my report in terms of James Gray and I wrote on the behalf of the Chief Constable and the board. Can I just say, if I may, Chair, on reflection, and going back to what the Chief has been saying, the impact of this, and going back to the question from Angela Leach on the event on Monday around reform. And my view is that reform has to be rewarded and not being given the money that you need, getting 50% of what's required, if that is the case, when you're one of the very few organisations that's gone from 8 legacy forces, specialist units into 1 national force. So reform is not rewarded in those terms, and I think that I'm reflecting on that, and I'd like to say that, Chair, at this meeting. Moving on, we are relocating to Dalmarnock, the SPA, at the end of March. Again, that fits in with the Scottish Government's Single Scottish strategy, because the lease comes to the end in May. That will save $300,000 a year. And for me as accountable officer, it will mean I'm close to the corporate staff in Police Scotland. 60% of them are in that building. In terms of the review of section gender, that's been touched on by Mr Hay in terms of his committee, and I'm just referring to correspondence on that and to reassure that the Policing Performance Committee are very much focused on that. And best value review of policing, I have been in contact with the HMICS in terms of where we are in that, and that is progressing. I'm happy to maybe take some questions and talk about that further. The appended to my report is the Scottish Railway Policing Committee, their latest meeting, and also I just want to recognise and thank the LGBTI Police Association for their continued and constructive engagement, and myself and the previous chair met with them recently. Finally, Chair, I'd like to just confirm, which I have done in writing to you and the board and to the Chief Constable for information, my intended retirement date is the 30th of September 2025, which gives me time to get over the line, as I say, some key strategic issues, which will also include supporting the authority in recruiting a new Chief Executive. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Indeed, Lynn, and there'll be plenty of time for us to thank you, but I'd like to set on record on behalf of the authority a very grateful thanks to you for your sterling work as Chief Executive, and also for your thoughtfulness about timing of your retirement, and we're indeed incredibly grateful to you, so thank you very much indeed. I understand Angela Leach has a question.
Thank you. Yes, and Lynn, it relates to section 7 of your report on best value. And it ties in your comments on reform as well, because I think the best value audit that is forthcoming on looking at SPA, Forensic Services and Police Scotland is a further opportunity for us to demonstrate just how embedded the reform is and the next phase of it. Important for the organisation, but equally important for our partners and communities. And I think the significance of being a joint audit shouldn't be lost on us either. This will be really, really important in terms of our taking further assurance about the work of the respective organisations. So I noted in the report that the audit is imminent, April, May, but that both audit partners, scrutiny bodies, would be undertaking more detailed work in advance of that. So I'm just thinking about the timescales involved here. And I wondered if you could comment further on just what that engagement has been with the scrutiny bodies to date, and also maybe expand on some of the work that is being undertaken within the 3 respective organisations in preparation for that. Thank you.
Chair, I will talk generally, and I'll talk about the SPA and forensics, and DCC Spheres may want to comment on the preparations within Police Scotland. So what has happened since over the last couple of months is that the HMICS and all of Scotland have come back to confirm the areas that they're going to look at in terms of best values. That will be vision, leadership, governance, accountability, the use of resources, effective partnerships, performance management, sustainability and equalities. And I think there will be a good story to be told by all, as I call the 3 pillars, Police Scotland, SPA and forensics, in all of those areas. What I was concerned about was I wasn't given any clear deadline as to what they expected from us in terms of documentation. I've since had, there was a meeting with myself and the interim chair, Mr Naylor, and they have confirmed that they will give us a terms of reference in April. They aren't looking at anything to be submitted in advance unless they ask for it around documentation. And they will then do their field work. So in terms of the SPA and forensics, I've spoken to the Director. We are preparing as we were. We will have a self-evaluation against those 8 areas that they're going to look at, and we will have that complete to be available for any questions. They talk about key lines of inquiry. They don't tell you what they are, and I'm hoping they're against those 8 areas that they've identified. So we're as well prepared as we can be, and I know that Police Scotland have made real good progress too, but DCC Spears might want to add to that, or the Chief.
Chair, and then I'll pass on to Alan. We welcome the inspection. Obviously, first time that a best value review has been conducted across the organisations during the lifetime of the organisations. And to reiterate the point in terms of, I think there's a good story to tell. There's a lot of evidence that we will present to HMICS and Audit Scotland, and we'll welcome obviously their findings and areas where we can improve. I've talked today about the way in which the budget and the finances are arranged across the organisation, and I think it's an opportunity for us to seek some either reinforcement of that, the direction of travel around, evolving the way in which we manage the finances, multi-year reserves, and some sort of borrowing powers. So I'm hoping for some support from the 2 inspectorate bodies, particularly in that area, when you consider the scale and size and complexity in which we operate, and our drive for efficiency, effectiveness, and best use of taxpayers' money.
Thank you. We have been working hard in this space. It's not lost on us that, in my experience, I've been involved in audit over the last 5 or 6 years. There's been very few instances where we've been subject to a joint audit, and we recognise that the approach that HMI will take might be slightly different from that of Audit Scotland. So a lot of the preparation we are doing is set against the improvement framework that we know that Audit Scotland will use. So we have surveyed over 100 of our top leaders within Police Scotland, asked them a series of questions and drawn some data from that. We also know that 8 themes will be a focus on, and we've identified 8 theme leads, which in effect are experts in those areas. It's their task, which is now well underway, having all carried out a series of workshops, to do the initial self-evaluation and start to build an evidence base that would support their evaluation. Our next steps in March will be for those theme leads to present that self-evaluation to ourselves as an executive, and it will be for ourselves to try and ratify and agree the position on that evaluation. So that work will be completed during the course of March, and certainly ahead of any terms of reference. Underpinning that is we have, over a period of time, built a small team which carries a huge level of expertise in and around best value, and I think having seen 1 or 2 new people join us in recent months, that will add significant value. So I think we will make the detail around our self-evaluation available as that emerges. Thank you.
James, thanks both. I think that's really reassuring. I think demonstrating the self-awareness of where we are currently and how we plan to get to where we want to be will be really important in this process. So thank you.
Very much. Any other members? Chris, are you wanting to ask about appointments?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Lynn, for your report. Of course, I've noted, as we all have, item 3 in terms of board member recruitment on your update this morning, and obviously that's helpful to hear that progress is happening in terms of recruitment. I'm mindful, however, that we're shortly to lose 3 members, and that there'll be a gap between their retirement and the appointment of new members. So I just wondered if you could say something about how we manage the capacity and capability of our oversight and scrutiny in the interim.
Thank you. Yes, and earlier on in the meeting, there was movements on the committees. In fact, yourself, Chris, is now going to be chair of the legal committee come April, etc. That's part of how we are going to deal with the interim. Also, my view would be members would be very much focusing on the core, the governance issues in terms over the next couple of months. If there's any issues whatsoever, and I'll be speaking to members to make sure that there are no stress areas appearing in terms of time, I will go back to the government in terms of maybe days available to board members, if that's appropriate. I would say, however, they have been in touch this week with, I would say, not confirmed, but quite positive timelines for the board members, because it's not just the 3 who are coming to the end of their tenure at the end of March. There's also Mr Halpin and Ms Keithley in March 26 will be coming to the end of their 8-year tenures. So we're looking to 4 or 5. We need to recruit soon. But I have to say that has been quite a positive response from the Scottish Government, and I hope that that continues over the next couple of weeks.
Okay, any more for the Chief Executive? So I'm going to pass over now to Ms Douglas in terms of the Forensic Services report.
Thank you, Chair. So building on comments made earlier in the meeting in relation to drug driving, my report sets out the current challenges in relation to the growth in demand for forensic toxicology testing as a result of the increased utilisation of testing used to detect drugs at the roadside. Forensic Services has supported the festive drink and drug driving campaign as referenced by the Chief Constable. And it's clear from the results obtained of the need for this vital testing to support Police Scotland to tackle the problem of drink and drug driving on the roads of Scotland. The short-term increase in demand, which has been seen in Q3 and discussed in detail in the Forensic Services Committee, is over and above the festive drink and drug driving campaign and has been managed through increased outsourcing over this period. This ensures that the risk of any cases being unable to proceed to prosecution due to laboratory delays is mitigated. We continue to work in partnership with Police Scotland to understand if this increasing demand will continue into the next financial year, whilst fully supporting the need for this vital testing to support Police Scotland to keep the roads safe. Increased demand over and above that set out in the Memorandum of Understanding will pose a financial pressure for Forensic Services in the year ahead. We continue to work with our outsourcing partner to understand the limit of their capacity that we can access to support further significant increases in demand in the medium term. In order to meet the increasing demand for testing in the long term, an initial business case has been prepared and was approved at the Resources Committee in December to develop a long-term sustainable model for criminal toxicology provision. A full business case is now under development in conjunction with colleagues in Police Scotland to fully set out the detailed investment required to deliver the increased capacity for testing and support Police Scotland's ambition to further roll out roadside testing across local policing officers. To support this ambition, I visited Shetland in December with the head of roads policing to launch a pilot of roadside testing for drugs. Forensic Services is committed to support justice in Scotland and to keep our communities safe and protected from drug drivers and the danger that they cause on our roads. Drug drivers in Shetland are now more likely to be caught as roadside testing kits are rolled out to local policing officers. I'm pleased to report that Forensic Services has maintained our accreditation to the international standard ISO 17025 for the 26th consecutive year. More than 75 days of assessment activity was undertaken, looking in detail at the organisation and management of Forensic Services and each accredited technical activity that we undertake. In addition to their assessment, Forensic Services reported our assessment of compliance to the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner's Codes of Practice at the end of last year. In January, the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner provided confirmation that he was satisfied that Forensic Services are currently using biometric data in a lawful, effective and ethical manner. Turning to the results of the staff survey, we have now received the results of the second survey which we undertook last year, which was supported by an external organisation called Involve, who champion diversity and inclusion in business. Forensic Services will be sharing the results of the second survey with our staff and trade union colleagues shortly, and will, with them, be developing plans to take forward all of the recommendations made, and this plan will be shared with the Forensic Services Committee in May. In January, 4 members of the Westminster Forensic Commission visited Gartcosh, and we had detailed discussions around the model of forensic science delivery in Scotland. This commission is due to report on its findings in relation to forensic provision in England and Wales to the all-party parliamentary group in Westminster in the spring, with a particular focus on miscarriages of justice. On a lighter note, we were delighted to welcome all members of the Bloody Scotland group of crime writers to the Scottish Crime Campus in February. The authors met with our forensic operations lead, and as you would expect, there was spirited discussion in relation to forensic science. And we also used the opportunity for them to learn about innovations coming within forensic science in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm opening up to questions now. And Pauline?
Your report, and thanks to everyone involved in Forensic Services for the work too. I wanted to come back to the issue about demand and capacity for criminal toxicology. As you said, the long-term sustainable model full business case will come back to Resources Committee later this year. Can you give us a timescale for that? And given the current challenges, what can be done in the more short to medium term to mitigate some of those capacity challenges, given that when it's approved, the business case, it'll be another 2 to 3 years before it's fully implemented?
Thank you very much for the question. The full business case needs to be developed. There's a fairly substantial piece of work to do that. We are talking about a substantial change, not just in terms of the testing capacity, but requires new facilities, new instrumentation, automated techniques and new methods. So it's a substantial programme of work that will be included within that full business case. I anticipate it will take around about 12 months to complete the conversion of the initial business case to full business case. There will, however, be phases within that where we'll have more detailed information, particularly around the financial investment that will be required, which I think is particularly important that we get that information as soon as possible. In the short to medium term, we work internally at improving our processes and in driving our internal capacity up as far as possible. We have an improvement plan, and I think we've had that in place for a few years now, which is looking at methods, it's looking at making our processes more efficient and effective. So that work continues, and I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of the need to continue that internal improvement as we're developing the full business case. We continue to work with our outsourcing partner to ensure that there's sufficient capacity available. We continue to work with our colleagues in Police Scotland to understand how we expect to see the demand evolve over the short to medium term. We have a very clear, I think, view from the work that Police Scotland have undertaken in terms of what the future demand forecast looks like over the 10-year period which the full business case will cover. So we have a really robust set of data and a really strong understanding of that. I think the challenge for us over the short to medium term is how we manage the need to roll out this really important testing activity, knowing the size and knowing the problem that we have in Scotland in relation to drug driving, but really being able to manage Forensic Services toxicology capacity to be able to deliver the service, although the long-term sustainable model for criminal toxicology is required to deliver on Police Scotland's ambition to really tackle this problem of drug driving on the roads.
Questions for Fiona Douglas? Alistair?
I would actually love to ask you a question about the crime writers. I'm sure it was very spirited. First of all, I just wanted to recognise those 26 years of accreditation. Accreditation brings with it, obviously, credibility, and it's something that is essential. So well done to everybody. I know that wasn't something that you take for granted and it's not easy to achieve. The question I wanted to ask was around another visitation. It was the Westminster Commission on Forensic Sciences. And I see from your report that they are due to publish their findings in spring 2025. I'm pleased they've come up to Scotland to see the approach. But I was just wondering that learning's a two-way thing. So have you got any thoughts on how you might use the report that this commission is going to publish?
Thank you. I think it's a really interesting piece of work that the Commission are undertaking. There are lots of positives around how we deliver forensic science in Scotland, as you would expect me to say, but also in my career having seen both sides of the fence. And I think there absolutely is a lot of learning on both sides. One of the challenges which we have in Scotland in relation to how we deliver forensic science is what I've just been talking about, which is really around making sure that we have sufficient capacity to meet demand, in making sure that we can forecast demand, in making sure that we have good strategic workforce planning, because it takes a long time to change forensic science. And in England and Wales, there's a far more complicated landscape than we have in Scotland. So we have a much greater opportunity here in Scotland to really understand what it is that Police Scotland and the Crown Office want from our service over the medium to long term, so that we can make sure that we've built the capability and the capacity within the organisation to deliver that. And that is the area I think that I'm really keen to look at. What the Commission come back with. I have a lot of confidence around how we approach forensic science from a value perspective in Scotland. We don't make decisions about the work that we do in a case based on budgets. And I don't think that we should ever go down that route in the most serious of offences. We need to look at where can forensic science add value, and how can we support Police Scotland and the Crown Office in making sure that we're delivering justice. And I think that it will be really interesting to look at that as the Commissioner looking through the lens of miscarriage of justice. How do you make best use of forensic science, and how do we ensure that it's always robust, high quality, and delivering for the needs of our partners?
That's very helpful. Thank you for that.
So I have no further questions, so thank you very much indeed for that very thorough report. And before we close our public session, I'm going to press on and take up the last item on our agenda, which is with Mr Gray in terms of our financial performance quarterly report.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief in my comments because this report was discussed in detail at the Resources Committee last week. It is the Q3 report, so it is slightly out of date, but I will give a bit of an indication based on the January results that we've had and how that impacts the forecast. So starting with the revenue budget, the Q3 forecast was still around amber delivery. Our assessment now is that has returned to green on the basis of the pay award for police officers being settled, and given that we're into the middle of February, we're not seeing anything on the threats and opportunities that is looking like it's going to knock us off balance. So a high degree of confidence now that we will get to a balanced budget from a revenue perspective, but we will continue to monitor that, and obviously notwithstanding any unforeseen events, we should be okay. With regards to the reform budget, again, we are forecasting that budget will come in on break-even. That does have an element of a transfer from the reform budget of 5 million into revenue to help support the additional costs of the pay award from what was budgeted at 3% versus what is going to be paid at 4.75. And then finally on capital, this has, as the Chair of the Resources Committee said, been the most challenging area for us in the current year. At the Q3 position, you can see that the spend at year to date was £36 million. As of today, we are at 47.5, so we are making good progress. We have over-allocated the capital budget by £10 million. So we've got 17.5 million to go. We've got £27.5 million of options, so we have a high degree of confidence that we will get there, albeit this is certainly not a place where we would want to be in the back end of February, still with significant money to spend. And as a result of that, what we'll be looking to put in place during the course of this summer is detailed planning for multi-year capital for future years, and doing that in advance of the revenue budget, so that we do it with a lead time of 6 to 7 months before the start of the following financial year, which hopefully will help move us forward on this capital spending journey. But the final point I would make on capital is, if you were to look on previous year budgets, when in some years, when you go back, we didn't even have a budget of 36 million. The fact that we've spent that within 9 months, you know, we shouldn't take that for granted. There has been an increase in our capacity and capability year on year. It's just unfortunate, as you know, back to what the Chief Constable was saying, that when we get annualised settlements, we're constantly playing catch up. So we'll get to 65 million this year, and 76 if you include the IFRS adjustment. We'll then have to deliver a further 10 million, and it's necessary spend, but again, we don't have a long lead time to be able to put the arrangements in place to do that. So I think trying to work on a multi-year basis in the summer will set us up. But as I say, for this financial year, whilst it's uncomfortable, we have a good degree of confidence that we will deliver. I'll leave it there, but happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Grant, as Chair of Resources, do you want to either ask a question or add anything?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, James. I completely agree with your comments about the importance of multi-year planning. This annualised approach, 1 year at a time, does not help, particularly in areas that have got a long lead time, such as the whole implementation of the estate strategy. So I think the more that can be done to actually achieve a multi-year position, even if it's at a certain level every year as a minimum, would be extremely helpful going forward. And I do recognise the comments the Chief Constable made earlier about the importance of perhaps being able to borrow and have reserves to get the sort of flexibility that other public sector bodies enjoy, that we haven't been able to achieve in the decade of Police Scotland. But I'm very encouraged with the monitoring that's going on both the capital and revenue front, with, broadly speaking, 5 weeks to go to the year end. But we did spend a lot of time at the Resources Committee going into the detail of this, and I think it's probably reassuring to other members of the board that detailed scrutiny has taken place. Thank you.
Grant, thanks very much indeed. Do any other board members have questions for the CFO? No, thank you very much indeed. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of the public